Yo, what is going on, you guys? Welcome back to another episode of Mailbag Monday. I am your host, Jack, and this is episode 91. Boys and girls, I come at you live at a Bitcoin price of 106,040 US dollars. Bitcoin's market cap eases a bit above 2.1 trillion at $2.12 trillion. All-time high has not changed. It was made on October 6, 2025. We still remain at $126,160 as our all-time high. We're about 15% off the all-time high as I talk to you right now. For those of you that have moved on from UTC, Eastern Time, all that nonsense, and you keep track of Bitcoin block time, the last Bitcoin block to be mined since I hit record is Bitcoin block height 923,064. How the hell are we? Good to see you all. Let's open the chat. So I'm on the road. I'm on the road again. I am in Miami at the Cantor Conference. Funniest thing ever. Honestly, everybody watches this show, which I love and I appreciate. And if you're new here, consider hitting subscribe. But like Visa watches this show. Some really big investors watch this show, which is hilarious. I run this show like I'm talking to myself in a room because I am. Like I just shoot the shit. But anyways, I'm sure Cantor watches this show, so it'll be funny for them to hear this version of the story. But the conference is at the Ritz-Carlton, okay? So I'm on the carnivore diet. You know, I do all these health things. You know, things like carnivore remind me of getting into Bitcoin. When I travel, sometimes the easiest way to be on carnivore is just going to McDonald's and getting a bunch of beef patties. It kind of sounds gross. It's not, and it's real beef. And so I'm like, okay, I landed. I'm preparing for the show. I need to eat before the show. I have an event after the show. And so I'm like, all right, I'm going to walk to McDonald's 5 minutes away. I'm going to get a couple pounds of beef patties. Guys, I'm in a hoodie. I'm in my flip-flops. I just got off a flight. I walk into the lobby of the Ritz-Carlton with 2 pounds of McDonald's beef patties. These Wall Street guys are looking at me like that's the CEO of 21. When I tell you I smelled like a cooked cow walking around, the McDonald's bag has broken. So I'm like carrying it like my newborn child. And they're like, Jack, I'm gonna need 30 minutes of your time. Jack, can you explain Bitcoin fixed supply issuance to me? I said, guys, I gotta go scarf these beef patties down and I gotta record the Jack Mallers show. So it's good to see you guys. Coming into you live from Miami at the Ritz-Carlton, baby. So with that, let's go. Title of today's show is The Plot is in the Plumbing and Bitcoin Can Smell the Printer. Fiscal dominance continues to strengthen. It's becoming a serious problem. And as I've told you guys before, Bitcoin is a truth machine. It's telling you the realities of the world around you. Things like the US government, things like the stock market, things like the Federal Reserve. These things are distorting reality. They're manufacturing volatility to be down. They're engineering risk out of your life. They're not telling you the truth. They're not telling you what's real. Bitcoin is. It's in fact, I'd make the argument Bitcoin's the only free market we have left in the world. And so as the plot thickens, and the plot to me is in the plumbing, it's in the financial system, it's in the pipes, and the pipes are breaking. Seeing Bitcoin bounce around, seeing it react, seeing it move 5% up over the weekend as the US government seems to be coming back, and as Trump is introducing stimmies, brrr, you hear that? Shh. You hear that? That's the money printer. It's really interesting to see Bitcoin move. So first and foremost, for chapter 1 today, let's talk about fiscal dominance, when deficits set the monetary policy. For those that don't know, fiscal dominance is when, first of all, there's the U.S. government, which is financed by the U.S. Treasury. So, we've talked about Scott Bessent, our boy Scotty B. Scotty B is effectively the CFO of the U.S. government. He's in charge of financing what the U.S. government needs. The U.S. government needs military. U.S. government needs health and human services. It needs to pay interest on its debt. It has expenses. And it's Scotty B's job to make sure that those expenses are met. And they're met either with income and revenue, like tax receipts, or they're met through financing new debt and selling things like T-bills. Okay. Then you have the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is supposed to be an independent central bank. The Federal Reserve is not supposed to be a part of the U.S. government. The Federal Reserve is supposed to be independent central bank, not political. Okay. Now, whether that's real or not, we all know that the Federal Reserve is highly political and they exist to perpetuate the regime that is the Pax Americana, the empire. But that aside, they're supposed to be two independent things. Now, the concept of fiscal dominance is when the needs of the U.S. government and the needs of the Treasury and the needs of Scotty B to perpetuate all Trump's plans and all politicians' needs to get reelected, when those needs and desires outweigh and crowd out the quote-unquote independence of the Federal Reserve. So when I say when deficits set monetary policy, deficits is our government deficits, all the debt that we have created in the past and continue to create to march forward, it is setting monetary policy. It's demanding new money printing. It's drying up liquidity. And that is a very dangerous place for a government and a currency to be in. This is emerging market behavior. Okay, this is like Argentina. Okay, this is behavior where the government is so indebted, the only way out is to print a bunch of money. And that's what I mean by fiscal dominance. Okay, so first screenshot. I've been throwing these terms around, SOFR, IORB, there's all sorts of stuff. I had a thesis last week on the show that maybe the US government is purposefully shut down to dry up cash reserves in the financial system to force the Fed to do what the government needs them to do. That this would be an egregious manipulative form of fiscal dominance. I have an updated thought on that, actually. And so I want to walk through in detail, relative detail. This isn't the show to get too tight. You're not going to get a PhD listening to me ramble, okay? So relative detail, but more detail than usual. So first and foremost, this is from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York website, okay, as you can see in the screenshot. And this is literally from their website, secured overnight financing rate. So when I say SOFR, that's it, S-O-F-R, secured overnight financing rate. The secured overnight financing rate, SOFR, is a broad measure of the cost of borrowing cash overnight collateralized by Treasury securities. Okay, boom, simple. I'm not even going to read the rest. So it's the cost of borrowing cash, money, collateralized by, call it, U.S. Treasuries. Okay. Next, from the Fed's website again, what is IO, interest on reserves? The Federal Reserve pays interest on reserve balances. That is that IORB that I keep referencing. The Board of Governors has prescribed rules governing the payment of interest by Federal Reserve banks in Regulation D. So it's very simple. IORB is the interest you get for parking your cash at the Fed. Okay. SOFR is the cost of borrowing cash collateralized by treasuries. Okay. Now, what's been happening recently that has all these economists up in arms and panicking is that SOFR, the rate for SOFR, so the rate to borrow cash collateralized by U.S. Treasury securities, has exceeded the interest on cash. Okay. That is a big deal. Because traditionally, it's not supposed to work that way. It's intended to be the opposite, okay? You do not want the cash reserves being lent out. The system is designed so that the interest on cash parked at the Fed pays you more than the secured overnight financing rate, okay? Now, recently, this rate, let me pull up the chat. Recently, this rate has done the opposite. You can see here, it's typically, I don't want to say there's a target because there's not actually a real target, but generally in a healthy market, it's about 10 basis points below. So you can see here, this 0.1. This is a healthy market. We're seeing relative. January 2022 through 2023, and then you can see some unhealthiness at the end of last year, and it started to get a little volatile. It started to spike a bit, and now it's really gone vertical very, very recently. And if I go to the next slide here, this happened in 2019. So last show, I referenced that this type of imbalance, and I know it might not make sense now, just let me get through these slides. I'm reading some of the chat. This imbalance happened in 2019, right before COVID. Now, not the exact same, not SOFR over the interest on cash, but the same practice is that cash reserves got very, very scarce. The Fed implemented something called their standing repo facility to basically fix this problem going forward. So this is, again, from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York's website. What are the standing repo facility's operations? At its July 2021 meeting, the Federal Open Market Committee, FOMC, established the SRF, the Standing Repo Facility, to serve as a backstop in money markets to support the effective implementation and transmission of monetary policy and smooth market functioning. That's a very fancy, professional, Harvard-educated way to say we stood up this facility where if there are no reserves, if people need printed dollars to get financing in these markets, they can come get it. We will give it to them. So the Standing Repo Facility was created after the 2019 drama and crisis that we saw in funding markets. And it is effectively a facility created by the Fed to give freshly printed dollars to protect the rate of these funding markets. Let me check the chat. Does that make sense? So, in other words, guys, when the interest on reserve balances is over the SOFR rate, that means there's plenty of liquidity in the financial system, okay? There's plenty of cash to go around. When this happens, when the secured overnight financing rate gets higher than the interest on cash, that means there's more U.S. Treasuries flooding the market that need financing than there is cash to finance them. That's the easiest way to think about it. When the market's operating normally, there's plenty of reserves, there's plenty of cash in the system. When it's not, when you see spikes like this, that means there's not enough cash to finance the amount of U.S. debt that's being issued into the market. So now we keep going, and if you guys have questions on this, I'm happy to answer in the Q&A. So now we keep going. If we look at this repo facility that the Federal Reserve stood up, okay? So again, this was a facility to protect against these funding crises. When the market gets super illiquid, there's not enough cash reserves to finance the government. Guys, what's a U.S. Treasury? A U.S. Treasury is you're lending to the U.S. government. Scotty B is issuing these things and raising money to continue to fund the U.S. government because the U.S. government runs about a $2 trillion annualized deficit a year. As the world reserve currency issuer, it's implied you have to run these massive deficits. So when we look at how active the Standing Repo Facility has been, this will tell us how much newly printed money these market participants needed to continue to fund the government. If you look on Halloween night, it was tapped for $50 billion. And you can see relative to other nights and other days, now, hopefully and traditionally, it's never tapped at all. You don't need newly printed money to sustain and finance new T-bill issuance, new U.S. debt. But the reason everyone was up in arms about this, including myself, is because you can start to see the system falling apart. You can start to see there's scarcity in reserves within the financial system. There's not enough cash. And the thing that people don't actually understand is that it's T-bills. It's the U.S. government that is issuing these short duration debt instruments. That's the reason there's not enough cash. If the U.S. government finances itself with 10-year treasuries, so they're borrowing money and they don't need to refinance or owe it back for 10 years, for 30 years. That's a lot easier on Scott Bessent and the U.S. Treasury. They don't have to constantly be raising money, refinancing it, rolling it over. When they're raising T-bills, so all of the U.S. government debt issuance since like halfway through Biden's term with Janet Yellen and now in the first year of Trump's term with Scott Bessent, they keep going to the front end of the curve. What that means is they're not doing 30 years or 10 years or even 2 years. They're doing like 1 to 3 months. Like what Tether buys? Tether is buying T-bills. So yes, they are buying US debt. They're buying very short duration. That puts a lot of pressure on the US government, particularly Scott Bessent, to be able to finance all of this. And so you're flooding the market with new T-bill issuance. When you have so much T-bill issuance flooding and hitting the market, it pulls all the cash out of the system, right? So think about it. All of our bank deposits, money market funds, endowments, these are the predominant lenders to the US government. They're buying these instruments. If Scott Bessent, instead of issuing like one load of 10 years and not having to worry about it for a while, he's constantly issuing these T-bills, these shorter instruments. And so, and sorry if I'm over explaining to those that know this, but when you ramp up that way, you need a lot more cash liquidity to finance the US government. Now, if the US government could lend at 10 years, it would. But no one's buying that dog shit. Nobody's buying that dog shit. And so the way they kind of kick the can down the road is they say, okay, will you lend to us for 1 to 3 months? We understand that no one wants counterparty risk with the US government. We're $37 trillion in debt. There's inflation on the horizon. There's all sorts of problems. No one wants a relationship with us for 10 years as a counterpart. Will you take 1 to 3 months? And someone like Tether says, yeah, I'll take 1 to 3 months. That's virtually risk-free. I mean, at the end of the day, you're at least going to give me new printed dollars. You can't default. And if I have to take future inflation risk for 1 to 3 months, for 30 to 90 days, that's reasonable, right? And so that's what's drawing all of the liquidity out of the financial system. And you see the results of this when you see that SOFR starts to exceed the interest on reserves at the Fed. And when you see the standing repo facility get tapped for $50 billion, this is $50 billion printed US currency to protect this market and prevent it from exploding and causing a financial crisis. Okay. And so I showed the screenshot last week. I'm going to show it again. Joseph Wang. The Fed will need to expand its balance sheet by several hundred billion a year and may start in December to head off year-end funding pressures. A structurally rising TGA and insatiable demand for repo financing leave them little choice. So last week, my idea was, and it's not mine to own, by the way, like guys like Luke Roman, there's a lot of people that have these ideas, which is, well, hold on a second. There's two things that are really straining the cash reserves in the financial system. One is that the US government has now just resulted to T-bills. So these 1 to 3 month debt instruments, they're just puking them, constantly issuing these. So it's really pulling cash reserves away from sitting at the Fed, okay? The other is that the government's been shut down. The government's been shut down. The TGA, the Treasury General's account, so think of it like the US government's checking account. So the account that Scott Bessent manages to finance the United States, it's been frozen because the United States hasn't been turned on. Someone unplugged the government. And so the TGA has reached $1 trillion worth of balance. And so when you see Bitcoin chopping around, going down a little bit, guys, again, it's telling us something. Think of Bitcoin's price. Don't be mad at it. Don't get emotional about it. Think of it like a truth machine. It's speaking to you. When Bitcoin's going down, what it was telling us is there's not enough liquidity in the financial system. There is a risk of a financial crisis. SOFR is over interest on cash. The repo facilities are being tapped with freshly printed dollars. There is a liquidity crisis brewing. And the second is that the economy is in a lot of pain because the Treasury General's account can't spend. One of the biggest spenders in the US economy is the US government itself. We've learned this through Elon and Doge, right? And so the combination of the two was causing a mini crisis, was causing potential systemic issues if they were to persist. And so my idea last week was maybe Trump and Bessent are doing this on purpose because it's the way for them to get the Fed on side. They've been wanting the Fed to slash rates, reduce the cost of capital, and really juice the economy and focus on growth for months since Trump got inaugurated, and they can never get him on side. And we've seen op-eds from Fed members saying they hate Trump. It seemed very political, okay? But my idea was maybe they shut down the government, which adds more. They're pulling liquidity further out of the financial system, and that forces the Fed to have to pause QT sooner than it wanted to, start QE sooner than it wanted to, add to its balance sheet. So as Joseph says, expand its balance sheet by several $100 billion a year at minimum. So maybe this was their way to get Jerome on their side. That was my idea. And by the way, this is a screenshot that shows the TGA. So the US government's checking account. This is our balance, okay? So you can see this unbelievable spike. That was COVID. You can see the TGA hit over $1.5 trillion, and then it was immediately spent into the economy. Assets went flying, right? And then you can see it's kind of chopped around between 0 and $1 trillion. Okay, and we're exceeding $1 trillion now. And this is primarily, I thought, because the government was shut down. And I'm like, man, Scott Bessent is a genius. This guy's playing 3D chess. He's got the government shut down, and he's puking these T-bills out into the market, which is pulling all the cash liquidity out of the financial system, which is causing all these systemic issues, which is forcing Jerome Powell to do what he's always wanted him to do. That's what I thought. Now, I saw this Twitter thread between this guy John Comiskey and Luke Gromen. And Luke is, I've shouted out Luke pretty much every episode. He's the GOAT to me, the macro GOAT. I follow all of his stuff, and he highlighted this thread. And so I want to just read this thread to you guys because it actually answers some of my hypothesis of last week of, are Trump and Bessent doing this on purpose? What's really going on? So I'll read. John wrote, the TGA hit $1 trillion at end of day on 10/30. Why did this happen? Treasury's risk policy combined with Treasury's desire for stable/predictable bill issuance forced it this high. It is a mechanical effect that has nothing nefarious associated with it. So I'll pause there. It wasn't even worth me. I mean, the guy wrote a novel and he sounds really smart, but that's it. The point is, Treasury's risk policy combined with their desire for stable and predictable bill issuance, T-bill issuance. So this John guy is claiming it has more to do with the fact that they're constantly needing to issue these T-bills. And it's not nefarious. And Luke responds, so if I understand correctly, this is essentially a mechanical impact of more front-end issuance and sizable deficits. So Luke is saying, hold on, this isn't chess between the Fed and the US government. This is just the reality that if you're going to issue tons of T-bills, 1 to 3 month T-bills, and you have $37 trillion in debt, naturally, your Treasury General's account has to go up. John says, yes, front-end issuance means quick redemptions versus coupons, which forces the risk policy TGA level higher. The deficit impact isn't nothing, but the gross debt redemption has more and more impact on the required level. Luke writes, but paradoxically, or conveniently, this higher TGA level seems to be pressuring funding markets right now. John says, yes, the more reserves that are tapped in the TGA, the fewer reserves there are available in the banking system. Luke says, so it's not so much that the current deficits, but the refinancing of past deficits that are biting us. John writes, yes, 1.8 trillion is a lot, but when you spread it over 52 weeks, it's not that much. So he's saying the US government's losing about $2 trillion a year, but divided by 52, it's sustainable. But it's concentrated around the first of the month, maybe 150 billion in net spend, less receipts. There has been so much front-end issuance that over $400 billion has to be refinanced. Luke writes, so over time, it becomes more and more of a treadmill type problem. John says, unsure what you mean by treadmill type problem. Luke says, well, you have to run faster and faster just to stay in the same place as deficits occur every year. So more and more financed in the front end every year piles up, which equals more and more Treasury General account balance, all with insufficient price-insensitive demand for treasuries. Okay? Does that make sense, guys? So SOFR, the overnight funding rate, is supposed to be below the interest you get on cash at the Fed. The reason that it keeps spiking above it is because there's so much T-bills being issued into the market. The US government needs to finance its debt so bad that it's pulling all the reserves out of the banking system. Okay? That's creating a huge problem with just cash reserves in the financial system. And so people are tapping this Fed repo facility, printing $50 billion in a day to keep these markets stable. This is a form of yield curve control, but it's in these funding markets. People will say, oh no, yield curve control is when, the Fed is going to ensure that the 10-year doesn't get high enough. Yeah, I know what yield curve control is technically. But what I'm saying practically, the Fed is printing money to suppress a financial crisis in these funding markets. That's just a fact. I don't know how else to tell you guys that. That's a fact. Okay? And yes, maybe Trump and Bessent are playing chess with the Fed, and the government shutdown has benefited them to getting the Fed on side because there's no liquidity left in the system and the Fed has no choice but to start printing money. But this back and forth shows us that this is just a design of the system. If the US government can only finance itself through the front end, is what it's called, short-term T-bills, then the Treasury General's account has to have a larger cash buffer to make this work. It's the only way this works. And so the point of all of this, in a potentially overcomplicated way, the financial system needs a lot more dollars than it already has to survive, period. Because you're thinking, oh, the government's going to come back on, the Treasury General's account can be spent down. No, John's point here is that it has to be structurally higher because of the deficits. This is fiscal dominance. Fiscal dominance is like, someone clip this, if people want an example of fiscal dominance, it doesn't matter what the Fed wants or thinks. The US government has to finance itself. It can only find that financing on the front end. No one's buying these 10 years anymore. No one wants that level of counterparty risk with the United States. I'll lend you money in 1 month duration or 3 month duration before you got to pay me back. That's it. And so those come flooding into the system. There's a lot of cash needed to finance that. There's not enough reserves in the system to finance the US government. That means rates have to come down. Quantitative easing in some capacity has to start. This is science. This is math. Okay? Hopefully that made sense, which leads us into QE for voters, chapter 2. So this tweet from Arthur Hayes, this is me speaking, just in slightly different verbiage. Team Red got smoked today by Team Blue in the United States. He tweeted this on the day Mamdani got elected. Time for Trump and Bessent to run the printer back turbo in 2026 to hand out goodies so Team Red doesn't lose big in November 2026 at the midterms. I hope you're long Bitcoin. His point is very simple. It's a point we've been making on this show. The U.S. government has no choice. The Federal Reserve has no choice. And I've said, guys, I know Bitcoin 4-year cycles. I know all the chart bros on Twitter say that technically in October 17th at 472 UTC, the bull market ended because the stars aligned. Guess what? I don't give a fuck. I'm looking at the chessboard and I'm seeing there's only one move my opponent can make, and it's good for me. They have to print money. They don't have a choice. 2026 has to structurally be a massive year. Jerome Powell is leaving the Fed. Before he even departs, he's getting brought on side because there's no more reserves in the banking system. There's no more reserves in the banking system because all of them are going to financing the U.S. government. It is time for Trump and Bessent to run the printer back turbo in 2026 and hand out goodies to the people for midterms. Okay? We go on. This is from our dear boy DJT. This was today talking about the government shutdown. Let's give it a listen.
Do you personally approve of the deal that's happening right now on Capitol Hill to end the government
Well, it
shutdown?
depends what deal we're talking about. But if it's a deal I heard about, that's certainly, they want to change the deal a little bit. But I would say so. I think based on everything I'm hearing, they haven't changed anything. And we have support from enough Democrats. And we're going to be opening up our country. It's too bad it was closed, but we'll be opening up our country very quickly.
Mr. President, that deal does reverse the mass firings your administration put through during the shutdown. Did you sign off on that, and will you abide by that if this passes?
Well, I will be. I'll abide by the deal. The deal is very good. We're not going to be giving $1.5 trillion to people that came in from jails and from, the gangs and drug dealers and all of these others that they wanted to be given health care, which would have hurt our health care system.
Do you personally approve?
The government's back. The government's back. All of the austerity, all of the Doge, all of the Elon shit is getting slowly unwound. Remember when Elon was going to manage our finances like a startup and save this country? Remember when we were firing everybody in the U.S. government that is so obviously fraudulent scammers, scamming the American taxpayers, scamming the American people? Well, all of that's being unwound and put back in place. The first 6 months of this administration, none of that progress is going to be sustainable, and we're turning back the government on, and it's all about printing money. It's all about adding reserves to this financial system, because you cannot run a debt-based financial system in some form of austerity or deflation. It doesn't work. Inflation is implied in the system that is built. Point blank, period. And you guys want to know why Bitcoin went up over the weekend? Guys, it is reacting to this. Whether you're left or right, blue or red, the financial system needs reserves. So the Fed, pause QT. You're starting to see Myron advocate for a 50 basis point cut in December after we just got a 25-point cut. 50 basis point cut in December, resume QE. We need to add hundreds of billions of dollars to the balance sheet. Dems and Republicans, quit the fighting, get the government back on, because the money printing has to commence. This system fails on its face if you do not keep printing money. Okay? Next. From Trump, people that are against tariffs are fools. We are now the richest, most respected country in the world, with almost no inflation and a record stock market price. 401ks are highest ever. We are taking in trillions of dollars and will soon begin paying down our enormous debt of $37 trillion. Record investments in the United States of America, plants and factories going up all over the place, a dividend of at least $2,000 a person, not including high-income people, will be paid to everyone. Obviously, this tweet, or whatever this is, this Truth Social is hilarious for many reasons. One of these reasons is because we're about to pay down all of our debt, but first I'm going to give everyone $2,000. Well, you're not paying down the debt. If you could pay down the debt, you'd pay down the debt. Why are you giving everyone $2,000 instead of extinguishing your debt? This doesn't make any sense. And then the other, stimmies are fucking back, baby. Stimmies are back. This is the most inflationary thing you could possibly do, is basically hand everyone to purchasing power on the house to go inject it into the economy. Last time this happened, markets had never been more bullish. Asset prices had never been more inflated. And I'm telling you guys, Bitcoin is starting to smell and sniff this out. Follow the Bitcoin price if you want to follow the money printing and the liquidity. I've said Bitcoin's the best expression of currency debasement. It's the best index on liquidity in the financial system, guys. Trust on this. The last few weeks we've said there's a liquidity crisis brewing. Funding markets are under serious stress. The Fed is printing money to ensure that these markets don't get out of control. Boom, government comes back. Boom, stimmies. For someone to sit here and look at me and say, yeah, we topped, the Bitcoin cycle is over. I'm sorry. You got hit in your head as a child. I'm sorry. I call the world how I see it. I don't see anything telling me anything other than number go up. And the fact that through all of this funding stress, through the Fed and the U.S. Treasury fighting about how the U.S. government's going to finance itself, through a government shutdown where the TGA ran up to $1 trillion balance, Bitcoin remained over 100K. 100K is the new floor. Guys, 100K was all-time high like less than a year ago. What are we talking about? Our all-time high within the last 12 months is now the new floor through dramatic liquidity stress in the financial market right before the year of midterms, as the president's tweeting out stimmies and doing deals with the Democrats that unwind all of his violent progress of firing them all. I'm supposed to be bearish? Oh, you guys got the wrong guy. More money printing. Thanks to President Trump, we are indeed working on the 50-year mortgage, a complete game changer. A 50-year mortgage. I mean, thankfully, I saw no reactions online of people cheering this on. This is outrageous. You'd have to be a moron. Just think of it this way. You get out of college at 21, 22 years old, and you don't fully own your property until you're in your 70s. That's the innovation that we're bringing. That's how we bring housing down. That's how we make housing affordable. Are you insane? The money is entirely broken. And by the way this financing works, like you're going to end up paying, like, I mean, I sound like an idiot saying it out loud, but like you're going to end up paying a lot more by being in debt for 20 years longer. So it's more expensive for you to have a 50-year mortgage than a 30-year mortgage on net, obviously, because you're owing more money over a longer duration. But the problem is we're in a debt-based world. Everyone is living based on their future earnings. Nobody has hard assets today. Everyone is broke today, including the United States of America. We go forward. U.S. shutdown nears end as Senate Democrats agree to a funding deal. Again, we just heard the video from Trump, but I wanted to show you guys this that hit the Bloomberg terminals because it tells the more true story. A group of moderate Senate Democrats agreed to support a deal to reopen the government and fund some departments and agencies for the next year. People familiar with the talk said. Under the agreement, Congress would pass full-year funding for the Departments of Agriculture, Veterans Affairs, and Congress itself, while funding other agencies through January 30th. The deal would provide pay for furloughed government workers, resume withheld federal payments to state and localities, and recall agencies' employees who were laid off during the shutdown. So the record-breaking U.S. government shutdown is nearing an end after a group of moderate Senate Democrats agreed to support the deal. So the U.S. government is getting back to what it does best, and that's print the fucking money. That's what they do best. That's why they're all elected, is to hand out, quote unquote, free shit to the people. And I mean, the podcast gets all so tiresome, and I know it feels repetitive, but I mean, this is just the truth of the matter, guys. Like, they have to print the money. I'm not, like, you guys can't convince me to be bearish on Bitcoin right now. You can't. And through all of the liquidity stress, I mean, Bitcoin's at 106. It was at, okay, in fairness, it dipped below 100 for like a few hours, but it was around 100 to 102, and then the government coming back online dropped, and it popped to 106, and once the government does come back and the TGA starts to get spent, it'll pop again, and once the Fed cuts rates again in December and resumes QE, and it'll pop again, and I cannot imagine this thing going anywhere but up. And this slide is a reminder that Bitcoin is a global financial asset. Bitcoin is competing to be the world reserve currency. Let's be clear about that. And so there's money printing everywhere. When the US prints money, everyone else has to print money. It's a game of who can have the weakest currency, guys. I've told you guys this before. If you care about manufacturing, if you care about having cheap labor, implied in that means you have to have a cheap currency. We've said on the show before, if the US really wants to solve their problems, I can solve it in 10 seconds. Don't be the world reserve currency. Boom, problem solved. Then your currency will naturally weaken. Your deficits will naturally go away. Now the problem is that won't get you reelected. So how do they solve this problem while getting reelected? I don't know. That's why I'm not in politics. That's why I build software for the people. But the point is, China is not going to sit idly and let the U.S. debase its currency and compete in manufacturing. The U.S. wants to weaken the dollar. China's going to weaken their currency as well. The money printing has to commence everywhere. So this from the PBOC. The PBOC's net purchases effectively increase the supply of cash in the financial system, helping to contain borrowing costs and support economic growth. Demand for bonds has eased among investors in recent months due to a fund rotation into equities and easing tensions in U.S.-China trade relations. Money printing everywhere. They're going to run it turbo in 2026. That is what I think. All right. Last chapter. This is a shorter episode because I do have an event with all the people that I shared an elevator with my 2 pounds of beef patties. Innovation is deflation, okay? Now, the thing that was top of mind for me over the last week, honestly, is just the state of the younger generation, my friends, sentiment around the world. So, I don't know. I mean, watching the financial plumbing fall apart due to fiscal dominance is interesting. Watching the U.S. government panic to reopen and start puking stimulus checks everywhere while they claim they're going to pay off $37 trillion. That's hilarious. It's as if we can't just do simple math. But anyway, where I wanted to spend most of my time is on this innovation is deflation idea. And this is this idea that, AI is theoretically deflationary, right? But the problem is, in a debt-based economy that we've built, inflation is required. You can't have deflation. I explained that a little bit earlier. Deflation's not allowed. Okay. And so what we're seeing is just the destruction of an entire generation and sentiment that's driven by technology innovation. It's so backwards. Like, if we're innovating as a species and building better tools for each other, we should all prosper because of that. But in a really fucked up way, we're not. In fact, society is unraveling right before us. So let me get into it here. I really had to zoom out to screenshot this one. I'm going to have to really squint here and to read this. But I liked this tweet. Debt-based banking systems are inherently inflationary. So, I mean, this makes the same point I was making earlier, but it's a good example. Imagine you live in a town with a money supply at 0. A bank opens for business and gives you a loan for $100 at 5%. In a year, you have to pay $105. So that's the principal plus the 5% interest. Where does the other $5 come from? Think about it. So you get lent $100, you need to give them back $105, but the money supply in your town is 0. There are no dollars for you to get. So how the hell do you pay it back? Where does the other $5 come from? From new loans. The bank finds another customer and lends him money. You provide a service to that said customer, and that grants you the additional $5 you need to repay your interest on your loans. The banks must continually expand the credit supply in order to pay off the previous year's debt with interest. This is why they say, quote, 2% inflation target, end quote. What they're really telling you is their credit creation target. 2% is the low end range of their target. Look at commercial bank credit in the United States. If you extrapolate this data to Excel and look for year-over-year change, it only goes negative about 3% of the time. And the years it does go negative, 2009, 2010, and 2023, are all coincidentally with banking crisis. The system needs eternal inflation to survive. So when people say AI is here to save us, save who? Deflation is going to crash the system. The system needs inflation. The only way to save yourself is to get out of the system. You can't survive in the system. The system has to debase you. It has to inflate. Okay, so we go on. Consumer sentiment from University of Michigan is weaker in November at 50.3 versus 53 was the estimate, and 53.6 in the prior month. Current conditions down to 52.3 versus 59 estimate, and 58.6 in the prior month. Expectations down to 49 versus 50, and 50.3 in prior month. So consumer sentiment in the United States of America is crashing, guys. People are pissed. Why are people pissed? U.S. job cuts for October hit 22-year high. Look at 2008. It's highlighted, the global financial crisis. Look at COVID, 2020, the pandemic. It's highlighted. We are crushing both of those eras in layoffs. Over 153,000 people laid off. Layoffs for any October, highest since 2003. Warehousing and technology sectors led last month's charge. and this is also embedded in here as a JP Morgan quote. JP Morgan says market rocked by, quote, headlines that layoffs are spiking due to AI. The market is weighing a weaker labor market and potential spending versus evidence on the efficacy and ROI of AI plus productivity gains. Okay. Next, U.S. industry shedding and gaining workers. Some of the leading the sectors losing the most jobs. Warehousing, technology. Look at that. Look at technology at number 2. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. I mean, there's just no doubt that AI is having a significant impact on society. And the thing is, everyone, if you go online or you ask people on the train on your commute to work, they say, oh, AI is going to save us. We're going to grow our way out of it. Imagine when we don't need to have all of this stuff to be productive. Yeah, but have all this stuff to be productive, that means no one has jobs. All these people have mortgages. All these people have car notes. All these people have credit cards. All these people have student loans. Also, all these people are humans. They've sacrificed and lived a very specific life with the expectation that they're not only going to get employed, but their employment income would grow, outgrow inflation. So we go next. Now, I tried to tweet this chart. I'm gonna admit, I kind of botched the tweet a little bit. But what we're looking at here is the University of Michigan consumer sentiment in white and the S&P 500 in blue. Okay? The point of this chart, and for those listening, is that consumer sentiment in America and the stock market were 1-to-1. They equaled each other. Stock market went down, consumer sentiment was bad. Stock market had all-time highs, consumer sentiment was good. Now, what you can see very clearly is this broke in 2020 in COVID, where the stock market went up, and consumer sentiment has gone down since. Consumer sentiment is lower today than it was during the 2008 financial crisis and the years that followed. I'm going to say that again. The stock market is at an all-time high. Consumer sentiment is at an all-time low in the last 25 years. The people are in pain, but assets are at all-time highs. Now, if I then overlay the stock market measured in gold and the stock market measured in Bitcoin on this chart, it tells a much more honest story. So what are we looking at? In white, consumer sentiment. In blue, the S&P 500. In yellow, you're looking at the stock market, the S&P 500 measured in gold. The S&P 500 measured in gold matches about consumer sentiment. It makes a lot more sense. So we're measuring the S&P 500 in the wrong ruler. We're using the wrong measuring system. Dollars are pointless. They're worthless. They're distorting reality. If you measure the stock market in gold, you'd realize the world has been going to shit for decades. And that no one's job out of college is outpacing inflation. There's a K-shaped economy that's already been formed. Most of America has been living through a recession, a depression, a real depression. I've said on this show before, you all have been living through a depression. You're like, man, I wonder what it was like during the Great Depression. You're living through one. Just measure it in the right asset, because during the real Great Depression, 100 years ago, the dollar was backed by gold. Now the dollar is backed by someone clicking a keystroke on a computer. So if you measure it in gold like it was during the Great Depression years prior, you're living through one right now. And on this chart, this is my favorite part, I put the S&P 500 against Bitcoin. Look at that. As soon as Bitcoin launched, the S&P 500 measured against Bitcoin went to zero as fast as it could. And so the way I read this chart is the blue line is a distorted version of reality. It's not real, because consumer sentiment, gold, and Bitcoin tell the opposite story. It's tricking you. And consumer sentiment is trying to catch up to gold. And consumer sentiment and gold is trying to catch up to Bitcoin. Bitcoin tells you the future. Bitcoin tells you the truth. You can't cheat Bitcoin. You can't confiscate it in central banks and governments. You can't go on and off, the gold reserve. We divorced from the gold reserve. We're back on it. Can't do that. Bitcoin doesn't need anybody. It is a self-contained, self-operated financial system. You can't cheat it. So you want to see a piercing truth? Do you want to look outside the window and see the universe as it really is? This is it. Bitcoin is showing you how bad things actually are and where consumer sentiment is actually going. Consumer sentiment is going to find that orange line. So will gold. So we go on. 41% of recent college grads are underemployed, not unemployed, underemployed. And that's a huge distinction because the question is going to be, well, do we have an employment crisis? Is everyone unemployed? And the problem is they're not unemployed. They went to Stanford, got a computer science degree, and are working at Whole Foods. That's the problem. The problem is you have highly educated, articulate, coordinated young adults that feel like they got cheated because they did. Underemployed. The person making your Chipotle burrito has a business degree from Cal. "41% of recent college grads are underemployed, stuck in jobs that don't even need a degree, per the New York Fed." And you guys don't think they're going to print a bunch of money? All right, let's listen to this video from Jordy Visser. Again, it's my language and different verbiage, which I think sometimes is useful. Let's take a listen.
Chipotle reported, so with all this weakness going on, and we've heard that it's been hurting the lower end consumer, plus the lower end consumer is getting hurt by the inflation side. So Chipotle reported stock gets hammered, and in there, earlier this year as consumer sentiment declined, we saw a broad-based pullback in frequency among all income cohorts. Since then, the gap has widened with low to middle income guests further reducing frequency. We believe this is guests with household income below 100,000 that represents 40% of our total sales. The group that is particularly challenged is the 25 to 35-year-old. Those are the ones being hurt. This group is faced with several headwinds, including unemployment, increased student loan payments, and slower wage growth. That consumer is under pressure and they feel the pinch and we feel the pullback. You have to understand, this cohort had a belief when they went to school that they would not only be having a job, they'd be in a position that it would grow every year by more than inflation. That is the reason why you go to college and you get it, not just to get a job, but to actually see your wages grow. Now what you're talking about is it's harder to get a job out of college. They're getting pressured on the AI side, and then they have to transition to another job. But the corporate ladder is that exponential innovation is always in your face as a headwind, and that means there'll be more digital employees in 2 years. Double that in 3 years. That's the whole point of this, is it never gets better. So when I hear people like economists not talking about this and trying to pretend to sell you guys goods that, well, the Fed shouldn't be cutting rates because we're going to have inflation and unemployment rate is low, the labor force participation rate continues to fall. And as I said, I am renaming the labor participation rate officially as the rate of people that need to work. It has just become a problem that is only going to worsen.
Yeah, I mean, you can get the clues from wherever you want. Literally. It's like, throwing darts in the ocean. Chipotle earnings. Chipotle is saying the cohort of people that are struggling the most in today's economy are adults from 25 years old to 34 years old. They're underemployed or unemployed. Student debt expenses increase. They are burdened in this debt-based economy, born into tremendous amounts of debt, and there are no jobs for them anymore. And we've heard a lot about this K-shaped economy. How do you guys like my art? Here's the K-shaped economy. That means some of the economy goes skyrocketing and up and to the right. NVIDIA, Meta, Amazon, Google, and everyone else is unemployed, working at Whole Foods with a computer science degree. Never going to own a home, can't ever afford their car, lives perpetually on credit cards, can't afford to have kids, can't afford to have family, population decline only gets exponentially worse. You're 30 years old, you're 40 years old, living in your parents' basement. Not because you didn't go to college and do all your homework and sacrifice and study long hours and get a perfect score on the ACT. No, none of that. Because AI took your jobs. That's what they think, right? That's what they think. And so Mamdani won the New York mayoral election. And I've been saying on this show, guys, like, this is just the beginning. If you think socialism is just like a flash in the pan in New York City, like, you're wrong. This is coming for all of the United States of America. At the rate in which people are disenfranchised, young, educated, articulate, coordinated adults are disenfranchised and pissed, unemployed, underemployed, I wouldn't be surprised if a socialist got a decent level of voting base in the next presidential election. Literally. How are these people winning elections? It's very simple to understand. I was born. I was encouraged to go into debt. I was encouraged to borrow money from my future to learn math, to get a degree. I was promised employment. I was promised wage growth. I have no job, or I'm working at Chipotle. I can't afford my college debt. I can't afford to buy a home. I can't afford to fall in love. I can't afford to have kids. Fuck this. And the problem is, when you see people doing these like street interviews, it's no one is rationalizing socialism as a good idea. I don't think at scale, of course, you're going to find some cuckoos on the street, but I don't think anybody at scale is saying that this is a good idea. Here's the problem, guys, and I've phrased it this way before. There is a hole in the balance sheet. Okay? There's a $37 trillion hole. It's gone. It's missing. And it is not just printed pieces of paper we can create with a keystroke to solve our problem. Remember, money is your time and energy in an abstracted form, right? And so there's $37 trillion of time and energy missing, gone, evaporated. Somebody has to realize that loss. Who is going to pay? Not with money, not with printed pieces of paper, with time and energy. Is it the youth? Is the youth expected to have dog shit life and pay for the mistakes before they were born? Is it the Jamie Dimons of the world? Are they expected to lose in real terms on investing and lending to the U.S. government? Is it peer nations? Trump is saying, no, China and Russia, you're paying for all of it. Tariffs. Well, their response to that is, fuck no, I'm not paying for shit. If you want rare earths and you want a military, I'm not paying for a damn thing. So it's a game of tug of war. Who is losing? The problem is somebody has to lose. And the youth going full socialism and electing Mamdani is saying very simply, fuck this. Yes, is this system fair? Is state-run grocery stores like the way to go? No. But I don't want to lose because the system is pinning me as a loser. I'm not justifying it. In fact, I think it's terrifying and sad. But this is the reality we're living through. And here's the thing. The way I conceptualize Bitcoin, carrying forward my analogies, Bitcoin is a way for me to say, I don't know who's going to lose, but it's not going to be me. That's how I think about owning Bitcoin. I don't know who's going to lose. Is it going to be Russia, China, the banking system, the youthful generation? I don't know. You guys are going to have to duke that out. But I'll tell you who's not going to lose. Jack Mallers not going to lose. How do I know that? Because I got Bitcoin and cold storage. You can't print that. You can't take that out of my hands. My time and energy is protected. It doesn't matter the election results. I don't give a shit if China likes tariffs or doesn't like tariffs. I don't care if Jamie Dimon is the one that has to foot the bill. I don't care. I don't have to protest about it. I don't need to convince you to agree with me. You could do whatever you want. My time and energy is in Bitcoin, protected by cryptography, defended by math. The rules are upheld by a distributed group of humans all over the planet that want a fair system. So I am not footing the bill. That's how I think about Bitcoin. Now, this tweet, again, boomers simply don't appreciate the radicalizing nature of the last 5 years. For them, it's a blip in their overall decent life. For those in their 20s, it was the time to lay a foundation, to buy a house, meet a spouse, have a child. Destroying those years destroys hope for a decent life. So I'm just giving you guys insight into how my generation feels. Everyone feels like they're cheated out of having a family, ever owning a home, having a real job. No one likes doing fucking homework. I didn't like it so much, I just dropped out of school. I thought to myself, this is pointless. This doesn't make any sense. Honestly, it's a humiliation ritual. Get out of bed, put on clothes you don't like, walk in and sit down like a good boy and do homework that doesn't make any sense. How about fuck you? No. But people do that in exchange for the life that they think is worth living. And they're realizing they got scammed. The amount of radicalizing that is being done by the youth is immense, guys. I've shown this chart on here before. I'm going to resurface it. Incidents of assassinations. We are approaching the highest assassination attempts and successions, so successful assassinations, since the mid-1800s. Do you guys know what happened in the mid-1800s? The Civil War. The level of societal divide from fiat currency is immense. The level of societal divide from a debt-based monetary system is immense. So what I did, this is the chart I was showing you guys. This is consumer sentiment divorcing from the stock market during COVID. And then if you look at it in gold terms, it makes a little bit more sense. If you look at it in Bitcoin terms, you can see the future. Now, what I did with this chart is I just inversed it. Okay, so instead of looking like the world is declining, this looks like the world is getting better. This is a Bitcoin standard visualized. The blue line is the fake fiat world, the bullshit stock market, the savings account. They've tricked everyone into thinking that they're saving for their future, only for them to realize when it's time to buy a home, they can't afford it. When it's time to fall in love, they can't afford it. When it's time to buy a house, to have kids, they can't afford it. When it's time to pay off student loans, they can't afford it. The orange line is a Bitcoiner exiting the system, having children, real estate getting more affordable, education getting more affordable, family getting more affordable. When you live on the orange line, life gets cheaper. When you live on the blue line, life gets more expensive. So the white line is consumer sentiment inversed. So that's Bitcoiner sentiment. Since Bitcoin has launched, the world has gotten better for Bitcoiners. It's a bigger place. It's happier. We're healthier. Since I became a Bitcoiner, I've gotten healthier. I've gotten more educated. I've fallen in love. I plan to have loads and loads of children. I've started businesses, and I've been able to accrue savings for my future. I've been able to stack sats. I've become a net producer to society. This is the fiat world. The blue line tricking you. It's like underwater. Underground is the truth. And above water, this blue line, Trump says, oh, stock market's at all-time highs. You flip the chart, that's what becoming a Bitcoiner is. Exit the blue line, get on the orange train. All right, and with that, a little past the top of the hour, some strike updates. So the UK business lending is now fully live. If you are a business in the United Kingdom and you want to borrow against your Bitcoin, we can support you at 10,000 GBP minimum. Next, we also enabled lending in Idaho. So we continue to expand our lending product. We're going to be everywhere as soon as we possibly can. And there's some drama over the last week, but we're regulated, we're compliant, we do this legally. And so obviously we can't just be everywhere because there are laws, or else I would be everywhere, but I can't. And so we get licenses on our own. We do everything the right way, and so we finally were able to allow loans in Idaho. So if you are a resident in Idaho and you want to borrow against your Bitcoin with Strike, you now can. 21. Okay, real quick. You guys know I can't say much, and I know everyone tweets at me every single day, like, dude, talk about 21, talk about 21. I can't. And in fact, if I did, I would do more harm than good. And I know it's hard to believe. It's the truth. We're almost done, guys. We're getting there. But I can't say much. There were these few tweets that I did want to comment on and make sure I just gave, I don't know, you guys are misunderstanding how this works, and I would feel bad if I did not comment on this. So let me pull up quickly what exactly I'm allowed to say to you. But anyways, the tweet reads, "Hey Jack Mallers, any chance you could explain the CEP corporate action in a manner that even the plebs can understand?" And then this guy, "Gambled on some treasury stocks this cycle with a small percentage of my portfolio. Thanks for nothing, Bailey." Just notified that CEP is offering to buy my CEP shares for $10.68 each with the current market price at nearly $17. Why would I take this offer? What am I missing, Jack Mallers? Okay. In a very oversimplified way, and in a way that I'm allowed to say, so again, just be mindful here, guys. Like, CEP is not my company. 21 is my company. 21 approval has not, or 21 merger has not been approved. And so for that reason, I can't say much. I cannot be pumping or advising on another company's stock. Okay. That I'd get in a lot of trouble. The deal wouldn't happen. I'm here to bring capital markets, or bring Bitcoin to the capital markets. That's just like my mission here with 21, in part alongside a bunch of other stuff. And so just be mindful here of this situation. But the way it works is when there is a SPAC, shareholders have what's called a redemption right. So SPACs raise money at $10 a share, okay? So all these Bitcoin SPACs you're seeing, they're able to raise money, they all raise money at $10 a share, okay? And then there's interest accrued. So the $10.68 here is the $10 a share plus interest. Now, every single shareholder has a redemption right. That is the right to redeem as opposed to approve the merger, okay? So if, I don't know what CEP is right now, but this tweet says it's $17. So at $17 a share, you could say, I'm not cool. Like, I was a fan of Cantor Equity Partners. I don't want this 21 stuff. This Jack guy's crazy. Tether and SoftBank, I don't believe in it. Screw 21. I want to redeem. And you would redeem for the $10 per share plus the interest accrued, which is $10.68. Okay? Now, if you say, I do believe in 21, I do believe in Jack, or I just believe that the number 17 is higher than $10.68, then you don't have to redeem. So when this guy says, why would I take this offer? What's going on? And people are tweeting at me like, this guy's a scammer. I'm not a scammer. This is how financial markets work. Everyone has the right to redeem. There's redemption right and clause. And so the $10.68 is the $10 plus the interest. And every shareholder has that right because this is going to a vote soon. And then once there is a vote, and assuming it is approved, then the merger would be successful. And then you guys can hear all about it, and will be public. And that's when the game really starts. That's day one. Obviously, we're working really hard on stuff that I can't tell you guys about yet. I've referenced it on this pod. But anyways, I hope that made sense. Most of the time, I just have to ignore you guys legally. I'm not allowed to respond. But for this one, I made an exception because this is a bunch of like financial gobbledygook gibberish, and most of you might not understand it. And so hopefully that cleared it up, at least to the best that I'm allowed to clear it up. Okay, that's all I got. Let me blow up my face. Let's see, Dylan, what time is my event that I'm supposed to go to? Oh, I got a little bit of time. All right, face blown up. Look at that. Look at this guy. Look at this Chad. 2 pounds of McDonald's patties in the Ritz-Carlton elevator. All right, let's see what Dylan's got for me today. Man, long travel day. And from here I go to Amsterdam, which I'm really excited about. But your boy has been on the road. Hopefully these suits out here have something interesting to tell me. All right. Here we go. Okay, Dylan, I see what you're doing here. Okay, let's go. Macro. An Aussie fan of yours. I love your show. My favorite time of the week, and favorite spelled with a U. Love that. G'day, mate. When do you think liquidity will significantly be turned on? Early, mid, or late 2026? Or later than that? Thanks, peace, brother. I think earlier than later. Midterms are November 2026, so the midterm elections in the United States are late 2026. They got to get this thing going. I mean, I think you can safely assume that if they had their way with the Fed, they would have had liquidity on sooner. So my assumption is, listen, like walking through the Treasury General's account and SOFR and interest on cash and the repo facility, all of that stuff, I mean, it's clear that Bessent realized he needs more cash than usual to finance the government at the short end through these T-bills. And a way to stimulate more reserves in the financial system is to cut rates. And so they've been very vocal about needing rates lower in order to make all this work. And so, yeah, I would assume it's now very clear that the Fed is being brought on side, whether they like it or not. Powell is still kicking and screaming and dragging his feet. But, I think latest mid-2026, but more practically, it could start in December. It could start in 3 to 4 weeks. And definitely in Q1 of 2026. But, I don't know. The point is, it has to. Like this time next year, they don't have a choice. So you just got to stay humble and stack sats at the end of the day. Q&A. Thoughts on Elon Musk talking about universal high income and growing our way out through AI and robotics on Joe Rogan? Any chance of seeing you on the Joe Rogan show? Thoughts on Elon and universal high income and growing our way out? Yeah, I touched on this briefly, but just to reiterate, growing your way out is virtually impossible because deflation doesn't pair well with a debt-based economy. You need inflation. You need new dollars to make the system work. The example that we gave earlier is, let's say you're born into a town that has a money supply of 0. A bank opens and gives you a loan of $100, and they're charging you 5% interest a year. So at the end of your loan term next year, you owe $105, the $100 that you initially borrowed and the $5 of interest. The problem is, how are you going to get the $5 you owe in interest because the town has a money supply of 0? The $5 don't exist. The way that you do it is the bank also gives a loan to some other dude, and you build a product or service for the other dude. The other dude pays you $105 or $106, hopefully. You pay back the principal, which is $100, the interest, which is $5, and you're left with $1 of profit. But the point is, all of that money was printed. It's a form of credit from the banking system. And so the system has to work in an inflationary capacity. If they don't keep printing money, then the system falls apart. So it can't be deflationary. There can't be a form of austerity without collapsing the very empire that we now know as Pax Americana. So, yeah, I think, no offense to Elon, or maybe offense to Elon, honestly, depends on the mood I'm in, but he was the same guy that said he was going to cut our way out of this with Doge. And we said on the show, that was the dumbest thing I'd ever heard. It's just physically impossible. It's as if these people don't think I can pull up like a calculator. And everyone's like, dude, he's the smartest person in the world. He's the richest person in the world. Who are you to say? Yeah, but here's the problem, guys. I was right. So do I want to blindly believe Elon this time? No. I'm just pulling out a calculator. What he's saying isn't physically possible. Do I think that AI is incredible innovation? It's going to make everyone more productive and society more efficient? 100%. If a business can achieve what Amazon is achieving with half the employees, a tenth of the employees, that does amazing things for productivity levels. I've said, and I'm debating doing a keynote on this at one of the conferences. I don't know which one, but one day I want to do a keynote on, I think the combination of Bitcoin and AI will spur an art renaissance. And the reason for that is for the Bitcoin piece, when you are living a life on fiat, just doing a job isn't enough. So you can't just be a doctor. You can't just be an accountant. You can't just be a lawyer. You have to be a doctor and be an expert in central bank monetary policy, or be an expert in NVIDIA earnings, or be an expert in call options. And so you become half the doctor you could be because you also have to be half of a trader. That's the only way to sustain yourself and outpace inflation. And mind you, you can't actually pursue artistic pursuits because they can't outpace inflation either. So you become a begrudging accountant that does everyone's taxes, that hates your job, that indulges in substances you probably shouldn't on the weekend. And also you're half the accountant you should be because you spend just as much time on your Robinhood account and on Twitter following people like me. It destroys society. Now combine that with AI, it's a waste of human talent and human ingenuity to just be an accountant. Sorry, and every time I go on these rants, I end up offending someone. One of my buddies that is an accountant texts me like, dude, what the fuck, man, you're such an asshole. I'm not trying to be a dick. My point is, AI can do our taxes. AI can write our legal documents. AI can read our blood panels. And then Bitcoin can actually be real, hard, fair, equitable money to build a prosperous society on, so you don't have to spend over half your time trading and speculating to survive. And then what I think we'll be left with is an art renaissance where people can pursue art again. And so I think AI and robotics are phenomenal. I think it's going to help bring back an art renaissance unlike anything we've ever seen. But not on the current financial system. We have to adopt something like Bitcoin for that to work, where deflation is allowed. Here's the thing. When I own Bitcoin, I benefit from human innovation. The prices of things go down in Bitcoin terms for me. Owning dollars, you don't benefit from the innovations around you created by your peers. Owning Bitcoin, you do. So Elon could say we're going to grow our way out. We're going to grow our way in to a Bitcoin standard. We can't grow our way out of shit. Sorry. And I know he's the richest guy, all this shit, but it's a dumb thing to say if he knows anything about what he's talking about. And I'm dubious that he does because we just watched him effectively join the government and utter and completely fail so bad that he called our president a rapist. A child rapist, actually. So it's outrageous. Anyways. Okay, macro question. Do you think Q2 2026 will tip Bitcoin into a higher Bitcoin price in fiat when the Fed gets a dovish chairman? Like something you said before, the marriage of Fed and Treasury. Yeah, I think we're going to get tipped to a higher Bitcoin price sooner than that. I don't know. I'm bullish, guys. So the Q2 2026, this person is referencing when we'll get a chairperson that isn't Jerome Powell. Hawkish is when they want to tighten monetary policy. Dovish is the opposite. So I agree with you. I just don't see how they continue to chop this around until then. But maybe you're right because, anything is possible. And Jerome Powell has been very clear that he's trying to take a stance. But yeah, I don't know, guys. Even when the government comes back, the TGA liquidity is going to be immense. So anyways, yeah, I agree with you. So I'll say my answer is yes, I agree 100%. But I wouldn't be surprised if it happened even sooner. And, remember, Trump and these guys have to win an election. And so that's the problem with politicians, right? Is I told you guys, I can solve the U.S.'s problems. I just can't get you guys reelected. Don't be the world reserve currency. Period. Done. Dollar will go down. Deficits will go down. We'll start being able to manufacture stuff again. If the dollar isn't so fucking artificially expensive and U.S. assets aren't so artificially expensive, then you can make the iPhone in Manhattan because it won't be $5,000 a month just for rent. Sure, no problem. It'll rebalance trade globally. But the problem is like, oh yeah, Social Security payments, those will start to fail. Our military expense budget's going to have to be more realistic. Health and Human Services, sorry, if you don't take care of yourself and you get fat, you have to deal with those consequences. If you like are unhealthy, that's your fault, not everyone else's fault. So you're not going to get reelected. You know, the problem is, here's the problem. People don't understand that they're voting for what we're living through. Like if I ran for president and I said, hey, here's the deal, guys. Long story short, we're fucked. The generations before us borrowed so much from our future. There's a $37 trillion hole that we all have to realize together. Like, we got to eat the loss. We might as well eat it now. The whole world reserve currency thing sounds better than it is. It's actually a disease. We're not going to be the world reserve currency. We're going to get on a Bitcoin standard. And all of this, like, if you get super unhealthy because you eat Pop-Tarts all day, like, we're going to, like, take care of that for you. Or the Social Security stuff, like, sorry. Like, you know, we have to start cutting losses. Someone would run next to me and say, I'm going to give you all this free shit. I'm going to increase your Social Security. I'm going to give you more dividend payments. I'm going to, like, Health and Human Services, like, you can be so obese that you can't even walk, but I'll make sure that you can live till you're 70. And that person's going to win the election. Like, people are voting for that stupid shit. So that's the problem. They have to win an election. And that's why I think you're seeing Trump saying, fuck it. If Jerome Powell won't cut rates in time, I'll just start giving you guys the tariff money. Tariffs were literally supposed to pay down our debt and balance the trade. And they're just going to go into people buying like shoes for Christmas. Because Trump's got to win an election. It's just, you know, like some things change, but they mostly stay the same. Like Bitcoin's going to go to a fucking $1 million. Jack, on a scale of 1 to 10, how bulled up are you? Ooh, talk dirty to me. If a 10 is like Bitcoin December 2017, I'm like a 3 or a 4, but that doesn't mean I'm bearish. This is a scale of bullish, so I'm bullish. I'm very bullish. I'm very impressed by Bitcoin taking record distribution from quote-unquote OGs, taking liquidity crisis in the funding markets, taking government shutdown, and we're sitting at 106,000. That is absolutely bonkers banana land insane. That is unbelievable. And I think Bitcoin it's the only free market, so it reacts in real time to the world around it, and they have to print the money, and I think Bitcoin's going to be the best performer when that era starts. But I'm just telling you guys, it's going to get a lot more insane. The thing I tell my companies is, you know, as bad as you think it can get, it's going to get worse in a Bitcoin bear market. You're like, okay, I knew we were going to have a bear market, but Sam Bankman-Fried didn't really steal $10 billion from people, did he? Oh, yeah, he did. Oh, yeah, he did. And so, however bad you think it can get, it's going to be worse. Now, conversely, how good you think it can be, it's going to be even better. And this is another way of saying that, again, Bitcoin has no central planners. It has no governing body. There's nobody in the middle between you and the real world. Like, whether it's your government or your bank or your corporations, people are mediating your experience with reality. And so they're like, we don't want it to be that bad for the people. So we're going to create bailouts. We're going to tell them what they can and can't eat. We're going to tell them what they can and can't do. We're going to tell them where they can and can't go. Like with COVID, don't leave your house. It's insane. But that's why the lived experience, it's like, well, it can't be that bad. It can't be that good. But Bitcoin shows you what the real world is. It's reality. It's truth. And so all of that context to say, I think things are going to get way better than people expect in Bitcoin land. Like, okay, like I've seen people say like, yeah, I guess I'm bullish. Like, I think we'll hit 135 this cycle. All right. I think we can hit 500. And I know it sounds crazy, but like, again, Bitcoin is the best expression of this stuff. It's the only free market. If the world is really going where I think it's going, it's going to be a lot higher than you think. And then conversely, when the world starts to fall apart, and you know, I'm not saying it's a super cycle, then yeah, like it's going to be a lot worse than you think. Like, oh, well, the U.S. government doesn't have zero Bitcoin, do they? They should. Oh no. So we'll see. That's how I'm feeling. Okay, moving on topics. Bitcoin and markets. In the coming economic reset of digital and neutral reserve assets, I feel many people will be left in the dust. What can you say about the late adopters and the potentially larger wealth gap? All right, I got a few answers to this one. Firstly, people say, well, aren't we recreating a wealth gap? Isn't Bitcoin just replacing who is elite? And then, you know, we've basically recreated the system, but instead of inherited real estate and the banking system, you just have Bitcoin OGs and early Bitcoin adopters. And that's not true. And the reason that's not true is because in the current financial system, you don't have to be a net producer to remain wealthy. You can have a bunch of shit, a bunch of assets, and do fuck all, but because they just keep printing money, you remain elite. You remain rich. Conversely, in a Bitcoin system, let's say you were early to Bitcoin and you've been able to accumulate 10,000 Bitcoin. Okay, and that's your wealth. That's what you have, an immense amount of wealth. Now, in order to keep 10,000 Bitcoin and not have to sell any Bitcoin, you have to be a net producer in society. You have to be productive. So either those Bitcoin get redistributed into the market because you sell those Bitcoin to live, and then your kids need some, and then your grandkids need some, and before you know it, some generations down the line, you're out of Bitcoin. Now, it might take many generations with that amount of wealth, but the point is, if you want to remain upper class, you have to work for it in a Bitcoin standard because you cannot just print money. You cannot just own dog shit U.S. treasuries and the government prints money and gives you 5%. Where's the yield come from? You seen those memes? Nowhere. And so that's why if you're wealthy on a Bitcoin standard and you're able to live without selling Bitcoin, that means you're a net producer. That means you're doing well for the world. That means you're sustaining your lifestyle. So there's two ways to remain wealthy. You can either consume less shit, so you can have someone with 10,000 Bitcoin that lives in a studio apartment in Chicago with a rent of $1,500, which would be hilarious. But that person could say, well, I'm not bringing in that much cash flow. I'm not producing that much for society. So in order to never sell a sat, I got to live cheaply. So you can consume less, or you could be more valuable. So if this person wanted private jets, and they wanted mansions, and they wanted all this stuff, in order to avoid decreasing their stack and distributing it back into the market, they have to sustain that lifestyle by earning more than they spend. And so, you know, I hear people say, like, we're just replacing the wealth class with a new wealth class. I guess. I mean, anyway. And the other thing I'll say is, first of all, I don't like when people get shunned for being early to Bitcoin, like, oh, you're lucky, or oh, you don't deserve that wealth. Like, a new tech, Bitcoin wouldn't have survived without the early adopters. Like, I think of people like my father. Like, my father is a hero because in a network in its infancy, it needed attention. It needed time and energy to bootstrap. And the people that found the market inefficiency of here's this incredible innovation that nobody else has seen, but I recognize, and I'm going to give it capital, time, energy, and attention, like, you get rewarded for that. Like, that is an immensely valuable service. Like, there were people making keynotes, conferences, going on TV, blogging. I mean, there were meetups in my house of like, anyone that wants to learn about Bitcoin in 2013, come into our home and like, we'll one by one, like, walk you through the white paper. That's immensely valuable. So like, Bitcoin wouldn't have made it Like at this point, Bitcoin feels too big to fail. And I'm not saying that like it wasn't back then. I don't want anyone taking credit for Bitcoin's success. But my point is like that was creating value for the world, 100%. So I don't think anyone should feel shamed for being early. And then for the people that feel like they're late, how many answers do you want me to give on this one? I mean, Bitcoin's like a fraction of gold. You're not late at all. I mean, I think Bitcoin's going to be worth half the world's wealth. So, we still have a 200 to 300x left in the Bitcoin market, in my opinion. And the other thing too is just bringing it back to money is your time and energy in abstracted form. And so it's not necessarily about being early or late to anything. It's about doing well for those around you, producing value for those around you, and storing it somewhere. Okay, fine. You don't want to store it in Bitcoin? Where are you going to store it? Dollars? No. The stock market? No. You're stored in gold? You're going to buy gold bars and put it in under your mattress? The point is like every single day I make a conscious decision to own Bitcoin. Like people say, well, you already decided to own Bitcoin. No, I make a decision to own Bitcoin every day. Guys, if I ever didn't want to own Bitcoin, I could just sell it all. Like every single second that I say, you know what, I'm going to keep the Bitcoin. That's a conscious decision that I'm choosing Bitcoin over the other market goods that I could use as money. And so I don't give a shit whether you adopted it 10 years ago or whether you're adopting it now. Like, in my opinion, it's the best choice. I still get paychecks every other week. My paychecks go all into Bitcoin because it's the best choice for me to monetize a market good for my future. Jack, in your opinion, will Bitcoin fail if we don't use layer 1 Bitcoin to pay fees to miners? No. I think the whole Bitcoin fee crisis, it happens every cycle. Like every 4 years, it's the same proponent saying people aren't going to, like Bitcoin security design is flawed. People aren't going to pay fees. Miners are then going to drop off the network. There's a few things. For one, the difficulty adjustment solves a lot of this where, if miners drop off the network, Bitcoin remains secure because it gets easier to mine. If a bunch of miners come on the network, Bitcoin remains secure because it gets harder to mine. Bitcoin targets a predictable issuance rate, and it secures itself by having the difficulty to mine adjusted on a very periodic set of time. Okay? And so that's not a concern. And I also just fundamentally don't believe that in 100 years, Bitcoin layer 1, like people won't be willing to pay Bitcoin fees to settle on chain. Because, for the next foreseeable future, a lot of we're subsidizing mining and the energy on the network through the Bitcoin block reward anyway. So, no, it's the same debate every 4 years. My answer to this one is no, not a concern whatsoever. Hey, Jack, Square just switched on the ability for over 4 million merchants to receive payments in Bitcoin. Love it. Can you assess the significance of this for Bitcoin adoption? Yeah, I've always been a proponent of, I think Bitcoin is both a monetary asset to store your wealth, but then also I think of it like a value transfer protocol. If you've listened to podcasts to me years ago, I would equate it to the internet. The internet is a information transfer protocol. So it's a protocol, it's a network that describes how peers can exchange information. And I think Bitcoin is the same for value. It's a network that allows network participants to exchange and settle value. And if you think about, well, what's that compete with? It competes with Visa, it competes with SWIFT, it competes with ACH. And so I think Bitcoin is fundamentally a better value transfer protocol than all the other ones that exist today for lots of reasons. It's cheaper, it's open, it's inclusive, it's instant settlement, so you're not dealing with credit and with intermediaries. So for all of those reasons, I think someone like Square turning on for 4 million merchants, I tried my hardest to get merchant adoption. I just wasn't the CEO of Square, so I can only go so far as like a 25-year-old kid. But nonetheless, Stripe's done a lot of work here. And then conversely, the opposite, and I think Cash App is going to release this just based on all their tweeting, is the ability to do this with fiat currency. So, I had this idea many years ago. It's actually a funny story, believe it or not. I had this idea, and so I had this idea that, Bitcoin can be used as a payment rail, meaning I could send $10 over the Bitcoin network and have it received as $10 or in British pounds or in Aussie dollars. How? Well, if I have a customer that wants to send $10, I debit the $10 from their account, I convert it to the equivalent in Bitcoin and send it over the network. That's just a BTC USD buy order, right? It's the same thing as if a customer is purchasing Bitcoin. When one of you guys buys Bitcoin on Strike, I debit your account for $10 and I turn it into Bitcoin. Now it's taking it a step further. Debit your account for $10, convert it into Bitcoin, and then send said Bitcoin somewhere. And then let's say on the recipient end, someone wanted to receive that in Nigerian Naira or British pounds or euros. Well, you have the Bitcoin coming in, you convert that said Bitcoin into euros and you credit the customer euros. And then you have a remittance payment cleared by the Bitcoin network, both in the settlement of the value, but also the exchange rate. So the dollar to euro exchange rate is actually achieved by going through Bitcoin, where typically if you have like a Naira to euro exchange rate, you can only achieve that by going through the dollar. You go Naira to dollars, dollars to euros. And in this case, you go Naira to Bitcoin, Bitcoin to euros. And you treat Bitcoin as the reserve currency. And so Strike has these features. You can receive Bitcoin and Lightning payments as dollars if you want, and people that use our API and stuff. And you can actually send Bitcoin or send Lightning payments, so Bitcoin, yes, with your dollar balance. So people have tweeted at me like, well, isn't it a taxable event if I go to Square and I buy a coffee with Bitcoin? And I will be supporting Square merchants, but I will not be spending my Bitcoin. I will be spending any dollar balance that I would have on Strike over Lightning, or my line of credit over Lightning. And so, anyways, that's been my vision. The funny part about that story is I actually had this idea. I was like, holy shit, Lightning enables Bitcoin to be for money what the internet was for information. It's a value transfer protocol. Oh my God. And I texted my buddies that worked at Cash App, and I wrote a one-pager for them, and I presented it to them. And at the time, it was just very early. And I also don't know if they knew what I was talking about at the time. I'm not sure. But anyways, it was too early for them to focus on it and work on it, or maybe they didn't get it. But that was another reason I started Strike. I started Strike for a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons was because I wanted to build this stuff, and whether it was Coinbase was just focused on shit coins or Cash App was focused on other stuff. So yeah, that was one of the first products I built at Strike, was moving fiat over Lightning so that it can compete with Visa. So what's the significance of this? I think it's amazing. It's a huge moment. Using an open interoperable network to settle value for a merchant is insane. We've lived in this duopoly of payment clearance with MasterCard and Visa. Now, I think it's going to be really hard to get adoption. I think it's going to take it's going to take longer than people expect. And I can explain that later if you guys want. I feel like I've ranted enough on this topic. But nonetheless, huge milestone. And if you want to spend your dollars to a Square merchant, it would work exactly how I'm explaining. We would literally debit the dollars from your account, turn it to Bitcoin, send it to Jack Dorsey's nodes, who would then, if the merchant is accepting Bitcoin payments as dollars, convert it back to dollars and credit them. And we would have achieved dollar-to-dollar settlement in a commerce setting without Visa, cash final, no fees. Crazy. So it's only a matter of time before all this stuff gets very disruptive and takes down the duopolies like Visa and MasterCard, but I do think it will take time for lots of other reasons that I can explain if you guys want. Let's see, Dylan sent me some messages. Hold on. I think your mic is rubbing against your hoodie. Oops. Sorry. Oops. Sorry. Not a professional podcaster. Hey, Jack, what do you think about the people saying that it can't be the world reserve currency because countries wouldn't let Bitcoin become a powerhouse over their own currencies in every country? Yeah, I mean, if money is time and energy in an abstracted form, then you get a lot of power being able to print it. You get to print time and energy. And so I don't think people are going to forgive that superpower very easily at all. There's no doubt about that. I don't doubt that for a second. So yeah, I mean, I would say I agree. If the world was rational and peaceful and people did things out of love, Bitcoin would already be the world reserve currency. So I don't know. It's hard for me to speculate when it will overcome some of these hurdles because you're dealing with very powerful incentive structures and human emotion that's complicated. But we'll see. I don't know. I don't have a perfect answer for you. I agree. I don't spend too much time speculating on when Bitcoin will conquer the world. I just know I'm part of, I had a passing thought this weekend. I was actually on my way to the Bears game and I had a passing thought. When people say Bitcoin is a cult, I don't know if it's a cult. Well, I know it's not a cult. I don't know. I do know. But what I was going to say is it's maybe more like a sports team in the sense that like I am team Bitcoin. And I'm team Bitcoin because it's more equitable. It's fair. The money's hard. Like it supports the things that I believe in. Very similar to like the Chicago Bears. Like I'm a Bears fan whether we lose, we win, because I'm from Chicago and that's my team. And it's the same thing with Bitcoin. Like I'm a Bitcoin fan whether the price is up or down or the president likes Bitcoin or doesn't, because I believe in it. I believe in what it stands for. And so anyway, interesting passing thought I had in relation to, I just don't speculate on like when it's going to win, when it's going to topple governments. I'm just here to support what the technology stands for. I'm just a fan of it, and I know it's going in the right direction. It could take as long as it wants, and it might take longer than I'm alive, and I've come to terms with that. Okay, strike question. Would you guys make a self-custody wallet app that allows for hardware wallets to connect to it? I don't think so. Not in the foreseeable future. There's plenty of products like that in the market, and I don't know. It's really hard to be good at one thing. It's even harder to be good at a few things. It's impossible to be good at everything. And so for Strike, we're becoming like the Bitcoin bank for the world. And I know that bank is a nasty term for a lot of purists out there, but we're a regulated financial institution that you can trust to buy and sell Bitcoin with, to custody your Bitcoin with, to send and receive payments with, to get a loan against, to get a line of credit, to maybe get a credit card. And that's what we think we can do the most value for Bitcoiners around the world, is a trusted financial institution to make their life better with Bitcoin. And so that's what our focus should be. If at any point, a self-custody app makes sense in our product suite, we'll do it. But I don't want to stretch us too thin and our focus all over the place, because then we won't be good at anything. We'll be like okay at a lot of things, and that doesn't benefit many people, honestly. Thanks, Jack, for the show. I look forward to this every week. Do you think there's a chance Strike will ever be able to operate in China? Not anytime soon, just because the regulatory environment. Like I said, we're not one of those companies that's just going to be like, we're everywhere and anywhere and everything that you want we have, because that'd be very illegal and eventually would get shut down and people would get in trouble. And again, that just doesn't do well for anybody. So if I would if I could, right now I can't. So any plans to have Strike in Taiwan? We are live in Taiwan. So Taiwan is a market we're allowed to operate in, and we've achieved regulatory approvals for Taiwan. So we are in Taiwan. I think a great place to hold Bitcoin is in a Roth account, taxes, etc. Does Strike have plans for both Roth IRAs and Roth 401k accounts? Not in the immediate term. Not anything you'd see like this quarter, for example, but definitely eventually. On the idea of being like the Bitcoin bank for the world, or the go-to financial institution for the Bitcoiner, I think that's a product that you guys need to have within our product suite. But some other stuff comes first. Actually, did I forget a slide here? Oh, I did. Hold on. I was just reminded that I totally forgot. I made a slide and I just didn't put it in about Strike's roadmap. Long travel day. Sorry, not a professional podcaster. Oh, I gotta keep holding this mic so it doesn't hit my hoodie. All right, let me blow this up and reduce my camera. So I had this slide and I forgot to include it, but this is what you guys can expect from us in the near term. So lending, meaning I wrote expand Strike lending across the U.S., including Texas, California, and New York, lowering our minimums to the best that we can, and scaling globally so that anyone can borrow. So just more lending expansion. Line of credit, so launching the first fully compliant regulated Bitcoin line of credit in the United States. Borrow dollars against your Bitcoin instantly and seamlessly. So you need to either be a bank or partner with a bank to issue a line of credit to Americans. We have partnered with a bank on this, which is very exciting. So this will be like the first legitimate line of credit product in the US, which is very cool. And the product is super cool. We went through all the designs as a team. It's like a payment method. So when you go make a Lightning payment, or when you go pay a bill, or when you go buy Bitcoin, you can do it with your cash, you can do it with a linked bank account, and you can do it with this line of credit that you have. So it acts like a payment method alongside the things that you can do on Strike, which is unbelievably cool. So the way I'll use it, obviously, is I'll hook it up to all my bills. So when I have to pay my credit card or my HOA or the bills I have in my life, it'll pull from my line of credit against my Bitcoin, which is so cool. So I won't need to have like an active loan, 12-month duration loan. I'll just have a line of credit, and then as my direct deposit comes in, some of it can go towards paying off the interest and down paying the line of credit, and the rest can go towards buying Bitcoin. Yield on cash. So Strike yield 5 to 8%. I would say somewhere in that range. It'll probably be higher than 5%. It'll probably be less than 8%. That's why you give ranges. The truth is somewhere in the middle there. But we should give you way more yield than any other service that's basically getting the Fed funds rate. So I don't know, Fed funds right now is 3-something%. We'll probably be able to double that. So that's going to be an incredible product, and it's backed by Bitcoin. It's because we're one of the biggest lenders against Bitcoin in the world, and so the way our lending product works today is we go to institutions and say we have all these people that want all these loans, and if you want yield on your cash, you can give it to us. We get double the collateral to give out a loan, so it's over collateralized, little to no risk, and we'll lend your dollars out to our customers, and so people are getting yield on cash that way. And you guys kept asking for yield on cash, and I figured, well, we could just let our customers get in on the same deal that all these institutions are. So if you had like $100,000 on Strike as like some rainy day fund, and you wanted yield on that, we can give you 5, 6, 7, 8% on that. So you're getting $5,000 to $8,000 a year, virtually. I can't legally say risk free, but it's an over collateralized loan with Bitcoin. So pretty amazing feature there. I know you guys are really excited about that. And then we're looking into the Strike card. Visa actually listens to this show, so shout out Visa. Every show they DM me. So I'm expecting a DM. I'm not going to dox you, but yeah, we're looking at the Strike card, and this would be a secured credit card. So the first truly secured credit card by Bitcoin, and it would allow you to live on your Bitcoin, live on that line of credit, so that you don't have to use the line of credit for bill pay. You can actually use it to spend. And we've thought a lot about how we can make your Strike experience better. Like maybe if you spend a bunch, because competing in rewards is ridiculous. Like I'm never going to build an airport lounge in the airport better than Amex or Chase. So it's just like going to be like, we're not going to have better rewards than that. But, spending on your card could go towards your fee tiers. So like you could, there's all sorts of benefits we can give. So, but I'm continuing, keep leaving me comments about the card. Some of you say, I'm just going to use my Amex. Why would I use the card? And then some of you say, like, if you give me the card, like, I'll never use another card. So I'm kind of curious if we should build it or what kind of card we should build, but that's the last one. So as far as what to expect from our roadmap, these are the big items, not all of them. We have announcements and smaller ones every single day that are sometimes equally as important. But sorry, I forgot this slide. So, what to expect from us. So something like Roth IRAs, not going to be more important than any of those. but probably shortly after those, if I had to guess. Okay, let's go back to the questions. Almost done. We'll keep the episode under 2 hours, so I got 5 minutes. Would it be hard for Strike to add the ability for users to add a beneficiary? We are going to do this in 2026. Some legal hurdles, but we're going to get it done in 2026. Oh, here we go. Jack, I saw you going off on Twitter about lava. Is there a reason to be concerned, or is this just competitive spirit? Neither. I mean, listen, I saw like some lava investor being like, Bitcoin entrepreneurs are being competitive and jealous that lava raised $200 million, and that's just the competitive nature. Let me tell you guys something, man. And I'm not trying to be a dick. I'm not trying to show off. First of all, lava didn't raise $200 million. And all the power to lava. Like I've said in my tweets, if everything lava says is true, it's a great thing for Bitcoin. It's amazing. I mean, I'm out here cheering on Cash App. Cash App's a competitor to Strike if you really want to be brass tacks. Cash App's who do you think competes more for my business, Cash App or Lava? And that's no slight to Lava. Like, it's just it's a startup. I think they have like 15 employees. So it's no slight. I have no problem cheering on quote unquote competitors. I think the Bitcoin market's big enough for all of us to win. But they didn't raise $200 million. The $200 million is debt financing. If we were to announce funding like they did, we've raised billions of dollars because it's debt financing to finance loans. So they found someone to give them $200 million to give out loans if they were to give them out. So the notion that I would be jealous about that, or like that I need to go out of my way to like compete with that, I mean, Strike is operating at an immensely larger scale than that. Strike's volume this year, it's like well over $10 billion through the platform. So I'm not going to get all up in arms about a startup having $200 million worth of debt financing. I do think that their announcement was intentionally misleading to amplify the marketing aspect of the announcement, but whatever, to each their own. But like, guys, I am the founder and CEO of Strike, which is probably, if not definitely, the biggest Bitcoin-only financial services platform in the world by a very healthy margin. Most profitable per employee, for sure, by a lot. And I'm also the co-founder and CEO of 21. I've raised billions of dollars this year to have the third largest corporate treasury in the world. I'm taking that company public. So the notion that I am jealous or competitive, that's not why I'm speaking out. Again, I'm not trying to sound like an asshole, just being honest. I'm speaking out not because I know any specific information that would be worrisome, but a lot of what's being said isn't true. And that's a problem. Bitcoin doesn't have any governing body. It doesn't have a police force protecting it. It doesn't have a military the protecting armor of Bitcoin is all of us people. If I don't speak out, who's going to speak out? I would argue I know this industry almost better, if not better than anyone in the world. And so I could tell you guys when something smells really fishy and is off. And there was just a lot of questions I had, and I'm speaking out for the best interest of Bitcoin. We don't want any more BlockFis or FTXs, and not to say that that's lava. I genuinely don't know. I don't know much about the business at all. I have no affiliation with it, no association with it. None of the investors, all that I've been asking these questions, none of the investors that have talked plenty shit about me have DM'd me and asked me any questions. Nothing. So I know nothing. All I know is what's been public. They said they did $100 million of new loans in 2 days, but the on-chain data shows that they have not received more than $50 million of collateral in the life of the company, which means at 50% LTV, the most they could have ever issued was 25 million, but it's probably substantially lower than that. It's probably like 10 to $20 million of lifetime outstanding loans for the company. So that $100 million being used to attract investors and customer confidence, that's potentially a really bad lie. That's I'm not going to use the F word. That's not good. The switching from non-custodial to custodial without being clear with customers and then presuming that there's no legal obligation and regulatory and compliance obligation or not being straight with people about that, that's not good. New York can shut your entire company down if you don't abide by their rules. Do you think I want to be in New York, guys? Of course I do. If I break the rules, I jeopardize myself, my business, and customers. And so the notion that like, guys, do you think Cash App, Strike, Coinbase, do you think all these companies want to be global and serving every market in every way? Yeah. So like, what do you think Lava is doing different than these companies that are worth billions of dollars? These are important questions. So do I know for a fact something bad is going to happen? No. Are there very serious questions that need to be asked? Yes. Am I asking them out of spite or jealousy? No, I'm not. I'm not out here fudding Cash App today. I'm not, like, of all the shit people talk about me, I take a decent amount of punches nowadays. And I used to complain about it a lot more. I'm used to it. Comes with the territory. It's just part of my life at this point. In many ways, I appreciate it. I actually really like you guys are always making fun of my haircut or my professional podcasterism. I don't talk shit back unless it's like about Scott Bessent and stuff. But that's more, entertainment and education. I don't sit around on these podcasts and talk shit about Bitcoin companies ever. So it's really just like in the best interest of Bitcoiners, honestly. So whatever. I stopped replying to that stuff at some point on Friday. Like I said what I felt like I needed to say. I made my points. I find it really disheartening that a lot of the questions I asked are yet to be answered. Like these guys seem to have plenty of time to promote their products and to shit on other people. But when it comes to how did you go from self-custody to custodial, what licenses do you have? How did you do $100 million of loans if you've only had $50 million of collateral through the lifetime of the business? Like they don't have time to answer those questions. I don't know. It's just a little concerning. But I have no issue. If somehow Lava created a way for all of us to be custodial and not have to follow the rules, that'd be great. Cash App and Strike would love to see that innovation, and we'd be the first to adopt Lava's newfound genius invention. But I just, none of us think it's a genius invention. We don't know what it is. We're just asking questions. So whatever. Too much time spent on this topic, to be honest. But no. What was the actual question? What'd you say? Competitive spirit? No. Like I said, I don't know. I mean, the CEO of the largest Bitcoin financial services company in the world and the CEO of 21 with SoftBank and Tether. I would love if everything Lava said was true. It's not clear to me that it is. And that's not good. Our job is to keep the Sam Bankman-Frieds out of this space. If we don't do it, no one will. There is no governing body that gets paid to surveil. We are the armor. Okay, last question. Hey, Dylan, do we already post the list of all these links for each show? Would be nice to have a weekly slide pack to refer back to. Why did you, what? That's not even a question, Dylan. Why did you put that here? Is that a question? Or are you just taking notes? Whatever. If that's a question, that's my bad. Okay, now actual last question. Aren't you concerned about the quality of McDonald's beef? Would be better to just buy ground beef at the supermarket and microwave it. Yeah, but bro, I'm staying in a hotel, man. I'm staying in a hotel for a day to meet with the suits. I'm not concerned. I mean, you know what I find funny? People will be like, worried about like the type of shampoo they're using, which I am too, by the way. I'm one of those organic guys. But they're like, oh, aren't you worried about the quality of the ground beef? But then they eat a bunch of fries with it. No, I mean, ground beef's ground beef. If it's got sufficient fat in it and it's not fake, it's fine. I'm not eating it every day of the year. I'm eating it on a day like today. It's fine. Because the other problem is, I order room service. Let's say I did. The problem is they're like, oh, you can get the steak. The steak is like a fucking 6-ounce sirloin. I need pounds of beef. It's predominantly all I eat. I eat like beef, butter, eggs, maybe some like pork rinds and stuff. But it's like I need like volume here, or else I'm gonna be hungry. I don't have time for these petite little steaks that serve you a bunch of bullshit on the side to fill you up. I don't want that shit. So, and I don't do coffee either. Like, you know, I find it funny that in order to be in shape, people suppress the amount of calories they intake, which is your energy source. So you're suppressing the amount of energy you're getting from nutrients, and then you're stimulating energy via caffeine and suppressing your appetite. So I do no coffee. Everyone always assumes I'm on drugs or caffeine during these. Like I don't have no caffeine, never done any drugs outside marijuana. I've told you guys that. And I just eat pounds of beef. My body metabolizes it as energy because of ketosis. So I don't know. Where are you going to get 2 pounds of beef in an hour before you got to record a live stream and go to a Cantor Fitzgerald event at the Ritz-Carlton? Fucking Mickey D's, baby. That's where. I don't know. I'm not worried about it. There's plenty of other things to be worried about than the quality of today's dinner. It was high quality beef. What a way to end it. All right. I got to hop in the shower and go kick it with the suits. Suits are very kind to me nowadays. If the suits are listening, I appreciate the suits. Good men and women in these suits. It's starting to get orange pilled day by day. All right, guys. Well, let's see what the chat is saying. I don't have the chat on my computer. I'm out of here. You guys are so funny. Cali loans will be in December, brother. Cali loans will be in December. I'm out of here. I'll see you guys next week. I'll be back in the closet. Peace and love. If you have any feedback, just drop it in the comments. We're always trying to get better, both as a company and this show. Oh, shit. Here we go. All right.